I believe all of you already saw Hannah and heard her bio, but she's going to dig into the logistics of adding livestock onto her vegetable farm. And we're gonna run this casual. I'm gonna jump off the stage, although this is very comfortable. So Hannah, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This is for me a casual thing. I just want to say that I'm a vegetable producer first and foremost, and so adding livestock to my farm has just been a kind of as it works kind of thing. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm approaching this from is like how does this enterprise kind of work alongside what I'm already doing and know how to do, and how can I learn these new enterprises as I go. But I started with a picture of my cats. This is Apricot and Russet, and just because they're really nice animals that we have on the farm, we love them. And I also thought about when I was just going through pictures and looking at things, I was thinking about the one of the big challenges of livestock on a farm is the food safety wet blanket, and so the stuff that our cats are sitting on is stuff that we eat and do not sell. Um, but yeah, the cats are also really important for rodent control in the garden, in the greenhouse. So we like we like their cute snuggling, and we like what they accomplish. So we keep them around, yeah, despite their hair and stuff. But I just wanted to start with the really simple thing of chickens. What we do on the farm is we actually buy spent hens from a actual chicken layer operation that's organic, and after a year of laying, they sell their chickens off for $1 a bird. So I don't know if you have stuff in your area like that, but that's a really convenient, easy way to get some chickens who they've mostly spent their lives indoors. It's a certified organic operation that we get them from, so they have access to outdoors, but they're a confinement bird, kinda, and so it's kind of fun for the first month of their time on the farm, getting them getting used to being outside and wandering around. So yeah, the chickens, we keep them in this coop that we can pull around with the tractor, and so we decide what places basically we want to have them weed. So we keep them in our tree plantings, our hazelnuts mostly, so that they just keep the grass down around our kind of young trees. And yeah, and they make us eggs, which is really nice. And actually, we only get about 20 chickens in a year, and we pretty much just eat the eggs ourselves. So it's not part of the kind of cash flow of our business, really. Although we do sell a few eggs at farmers market because people ask for them and want them. So yeah. But to get more into the real things that we do raise feeder pigs on our farm. I got into it because of wanting, there wasn't any bacon at our farmer's market. There wasn't any pork of any kind at our farmer's market. And so I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. I want to eat bacon. And yeah, and I had some friends who were had been working with pigs for a few years, pastured pigs, and so I had people to kind of bounce ideas off of, and who could support me as I figured it out. So we get pigs, feeder pigs, from kind of whoever we can find locally who's producing them, who's producing pigs that they're confident will be able to work on pasture. And yeah, and in terms of figuring out our pricing and that kind of thing. So we sell direct by the cut at farmers market, and we actually the person who's kind of my pig mentor requested very forcefully that we not undercut her on price, and so we try to match her prices, and she sells by the whole and half primarily, and so we have to do the math to figure out what a cut should go for based on her like hanging weight costs. But that's actually a really good kind of collaboration to have or request from a fellow producer to kind of make sure our prices are up as high as hers or even higher. Yeah.
How do you process? Do you have state inspected locker,
Yeah, so all our processing we do at USDA facilities because we're so close to state borders that we just need to be able to sell across state lines, and so we do USDA processing, and all of the processing that we've done has been more than an hour away, but not more than 2 hours away, so that's good. But we've had to experiment with a bunch of different processors because it's really hard to get in these days. So our pigs, we rotate them on pasture. We move them probably once or twice a week through the field, kind of depending on how big of a paddock we gave them and how much rain there's been, because they really tear it up if there's rain, and they don't tear it up too bad if it's dry. So that is what they do, and then we give them shade and water, and they hang out in there, and we feed them using organic, no corn, no soy feed. So it's barley and peas mostly, that we soak for about 12 hours before they eat it, with a little bit of apple cider vinegar. So they get a little fermented kind of mash, and that's pretty fun for them. They're very excited about it always. Yeah. Apple cider vinegar, we just add that to kind of liven it up and like activate a little bit of fermentation. Yeah. So just makes it easier for them to digest. And in theory, we haven't like done side-by-side experiments or anything, but in theory it makes them grow better.
how long do you have them on pasture? How long from feeder to butcher?
Yeah, so we buy them in at about between 50 and 100 pounds live weight, and in May, and then we take them to the locker. The biggest ones we take in September, and most of them we take in October. So it's like 4 or 5 months that they spend with us. Yeah, and we've been getting between 150 and 100. Well, we've gotten 200-pound hanging weight pigs, but usually 180 is our top. So not super big pigs, but they're that's hanging weight. Yep. Yes, I will repeat the question. So, yeah. Yeah, and then just thinking about integrating pigs with vegetables. One fun thing, we don't bring our pigs into the vegetable field because that sounds like a nightmare to me, in terms of them compacting the soil. They just dig everything up and really mash it around. And we're going for no-till, which I'll get into a little bit later. But pigs do love to eat kind of anything, and so it's really fun to put like our leftover vegetable seeds and other things just in the pasture where the pigs go. So this is a pig eating a squash vine, and we get a kick out of it, and they totally eat it up and enjoy it. And it's also kind of fun. Like we feed them our squash, like squashes that have holes in it, and tomatoes and things like that. And And so some of that comes up of its own accord back in the pig pasture if they missed eating some seeds. So yeah, that's also fun. Yeah, and the joy of a pig rolling around in tomatoes is just, yeah, not to be missed. Yeah, we have our friends at Seed Savers Exchange, which is really close to our farm. They save seeds from a bunch of tomatoes, and then they have buckets upon buckets of tomatoes that they share with our pigs, which is super fun. So that's my pig stuff. We can get back to pigs. Oh yeah. Yeah, do we seed a certain pasture grass? So what we do is we seed basically behind the pigs as they go. So we reseed our pasture as they're going through it. And we do buy, it's basically a deer plot mix that we seed behind them most of the time. And it has some grasses, has a lot of legumes, and has some brassicas in it that they like to eat. And yeah, it's mostly annuals that is in the pig part of the pasture because they just eat them up, and the pigs probably go through their dedicated 2 acres of our farm probably is pigs, and they go through that probably twice in a year, so they get a chance to eat what we've seeded earlier in the season, and then a lot of what we've seeded over winters too. Yeah, and about how many pigs a year do we do? We've done as few as 8 at once, and we've done as many as 15. So, not a huge number, but enough to be dangerous.
So they don't overlap with the sheep pasture?
So yeah, the pigs don't overlap with the sheep pasture. Not really, although sometimes we do run the sheep over where the pigs have been or will be. We're trying to be conscious of parasites. It doesn't seem like there's too much parasite overlap between the 2 species. But yeah, the sheep seem to be more of a, the pig pasture is, oh man, there's so many things to say. Okay, one thing that I'll say is that the pig pasture, because we feed the pigs grain, and we don't feed the sheep anything while they're on pasture other than mineral. That section of pasture has a lot more input of fertility to it, and it's like twice as tall when it grows in the growing season. So it's just like very fertile, which this year I guess we ran the sheep before the pigs got to some spots in there because we wanted them to be able to take advantage of that awesome grass. But yeah, it's also the pig pasture gets really rutted because of the pig digging, and so it's not super. It's a challenge to kind of manage that area in any way other than grazing. Like we can't really get a tractor back there or anything either. Yeah, so how are we reseeding behind the pigs? We hand sow. It takes 10 minutes to go over the 70 by 70 plot that they were in or whatever. Yeah, what about water for the pigs? So I didn't have a picture in here, but we have these kind of 80-gallon waterers that are like a pallet-sized kind of thing, and we can. The challenge with pigs is to be able to have with pastured pigs that you're moving around pasture is to be able to have something that you can move that the pigs can't. And so the way we do it is we fill up these water things and we keep them as full as we can. We have a hose that comes out all the way to the pig pasture from our well. We keep them as full as we can, and then when it's time to move them to the next thing, we are able to drain the waterer, maybe hose it off a little bit, get the mud out of it, and then we roll it to the next spot. So it's honestly, we're considering not doing pigs for a year just to see if we like not having to deal with their moving, because it's a lot of work. But they also make bacon, so it's like it's hard to figure out the yeah. Yeah, how often do we have to move them? We move them once or twice a week usually. Probably usually twice a week if it's raining, and if it's not raining, then we can get away with once a week. Yeah. And it feels like the pasture that they eat is kind of a supplement for them, and kind of just like adds diversity to their diet, but isn't anything that they're relying on. So if we need to just keep them in one spot for a while, we can, and they're not missing out on too much. Yeah. Cool. So that's the pig stuff. And now I have a bunch of sheep pictures. So sheep are so nice. They're super cute. We have a Katahdin Dorper cross, and I got my first 3 ewes in 2014, and then the rest of my flock is kind of their descendants. So our sheep are a year-round, are our only year-round livestock. We kill the chickens at the end of the year, and we get rid of the pigs and send them to the locker. But the sheep, we keep our breeding stock year-round, and we slaughter the lambs in the fall. And we lamb in May. This is what May looks like. It's an exciting time. So we keep the sheep on pasture during as long as we can. They're still on pasture, even though the ground is starting to get frozen. We keep them on as long as we can. Move them around in electronet fences, and usually move them once, sometimes twice a day, through the farm. So they get about a total of probably 16 acres that they graze. A lot of it has like apple trees planted on it, so we exclude them from the apple trees and have these kind of funny shaped paddocks that they kind of wind around through kind of perennial plantings, and then they sometimes have really open, easy square paddocks when they're just on plain pasture. Yeah, let's see what all I got here. Yeah, another lamb picture. It's fun to have people out and to pet the lambs. This year we had I just put out on a local listserv, like, come and pet the lambs this Sunday at 1 or whatever. And then like 30 people showed up with a bunch of kids, and we all chased baby lambs and picked them up, and it was super cute. So lambs are a great thing to do, great thing to share. Yeah, and so the maintenance of getting lambs, getting sheep taken care of. This is my co-farmer Emily, and our neighbor who's a farrier. She comes around and helps us trim feet. But there's just some kind of maintenance that has to happen, like hoof trimming, when we keep them around all year. And yeah, they live in our vegetable field over the winter. Actually, we've been able, so that's the most incorporated that they've been with our vegetable operation, is that they stay in kind of maybe 10 of our beds at once every winter, and we feed them hay in there, and then we're able to till up that spot, and put that new spot into no-till beds. So that's what we've been doing. We've been converting to no-till by like adding a bunch of sheep manure and hay, tilling it in, and then building these raised beds. Yeah.
So, do you have noxious weed problems, and are the sheep likely to eat that where you're going to grow next year?
So we do have a thistle problem on our farm, And the sheep do eat the thistle, not in giant quantities, but I do see them eating it. And when they overwinter in the field, they basically eat everything that is in their paddock over the winter, because eating almost still green thistle is way more fun than eating hay for them. So they eat everything, and then and it takes longer for stuff to come back in the spring in those zones, but they still do come back. But a friend of mine actually worked with wild parsnip and sheep, and like sheep really like to eat wild parsnip during some of its stages of growth. So she was trying to see if she could knock back the parsnip pressure, but I don't know if her research was conclusive or not. But anyway, this is our ram. So the other thing is needing to for a very small flock of sheep, we don't want the ram to be in there when the sheep are going to be in heat at the wrong time. So we try to breed in early December, and the rest of the potential like sheep in heat season is from like July through December. We need a different place for our ram. So we luckily have some friends who were willing to take our ram and a couple of our ram lambs to live with them for the summer. So this is just a picture of carrying a ram around in a Subaru. It's fine. So just making it work with what we have. And it's also fun. This is one of our employees clearing out cabbage from a finished up cabbage planting in a no-till bed, which we're not going to till in, but we take advantage of the cabbage by pulling it up and feeding it to the sheep, and the sheep love it. So fun to feed that kind of thing to the sheep. It's funny because the ewes who have been around for a while come straight for it, and the lambs who haven't gone through a winter with humans feeding them just like back way up and are terrified of you. So it's fun to feed the ones who know. And then right before they go into their winter spot, they do get to go through our field and get just rotated through as if it were pasture, and eat up some of whatever's there, including our cover crops. We just let them go through, and they smell really pungent when they go through the brassica section. It's kind of fun. And we have to source hay for them. So we were certifying our sheep certified organic for a while, and then we just couldn't find organic hay around us for some reason that was available. So we stopped doing that, and we just get hay from people who have it and are able to sell it to us. And the tractor on our farm, vegetable farming tractor, it's like 20 horsepower. It's not big enough to carry a round bale, so we have to deal with square bales, or we have to have round bales placed for us. So it's kind of an experiment with hay every year.
Do you have issues, or is your vegetable farm organic?
We are certified organic for vegetables, yeah.
How does that work where you put hay on there that might not be certified organic?
Yeah, so it counts as for our organic certification, we're allowed to put like inputs that are like straw or mulch that aren't grown in a certified organic way, as long as we have like affirmation or like a signature from our people that say we didn't put chemicals on this. It doesn't have to be certified to include it in our plan. Yeah, so we have to talk with our certifier every year about that. And yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is the sheep in the vegetable field in the winter, putting their faces in hay piles, and they are amazing and like go through. We give them a windbreak and kind of a cover, but they hardly even use it, and they like are just there in negative 40 degrees, when those polar vortexes come through. So that's really impressive and cool. Yeah. Yeah, so predator control for the sheep. We've never had predator problems, knock on wood. Um, we hear coyotes every night, but we've never had them mess with our sheep during lambing season or anything like that. Um, so yeah, so I think the electric netting is pretty good as a barrier against coyotes and that kind of potential danger. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, are there rules about having the sheep out so many days before you plant? Yes, there are for organic certification. There definitely are. So it's 90 days for crops that are above the ground and that you aren't touching the ground when you harvest them. So a 90 days window between having the fresh manure applied, which is the animal in the field, and although I think there's also a rule about like if you incorporate it, like then the window is less long, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we get the sheep out of there by mid-April, back onto pasture, and that gives us a good window until we plant our tomatoes and peppers in there. So that gives us a good window before they get harvested in August. Yep. Yep. The time frame is from harvest, not planting. Yeah. Okay, let's see what I got. Oh yeah, and this is me building some no-till beds. So the sheep have gotten off. We threw in a bunch of hay. They deposited a bunch of manure. We till that in once, and then our no-till system is me building 30-inch wide beds with 20-inch pathways in between, and I just dig out the pathways. And I only do that once, and then from then on, we just add compost to the beds each year as we plant them. So feels really nice to be adding that kind of fertility to one little spot in the field every winter. Yeah, and this is my last picture. One of our employees playing with a lamb. So yeah, that's the sheep story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question was how many times do we breed our ewes before we retire them, or what's our process there? We I retired my first two of my first 3 ewes. I retired them a few years ago when they were starting to both get under the fence all the time, and I was like, I love you guys, but you can't, and so I sent them to the locker. Yeah, so that was the way we retired 2 of them, and then one of them died of her own accord, which might have been a result of age. And so yeah, so far we're planning on keeping our ewes for about 6 years, and we'll retire them as their production declines, basically. Yeah, and I think right now is when we're starting to actually think about being really intentional about which ewes we keep for breeding stock, and what their genetics are, and how their relatives have produced in terms of how many lambs and that kind of thing. What do I do with the wool? That's the question. We have hair sheep, so they're Katahdin Dorper cross, so we don't have wool. They just shed their hair in the spring, which is really nice. So we do tan some of their hides because they're nice, pretty colors. Use them as rugs, whatever, but we don't have to deal with the wool. Yeah, so the question is, has our organic matter changed since beginning to rotate the sheep through the vegetable field in the winter? And I would say that the spots that we've had them, which aren't very many spots yet in the field, are like really markedly good the next year and the year after that, in terms of what they're able to produce and the soil texture. To be honest, the soil texture right after we get them off, we till it up, but they've been on that ground and they've compacted it down. So the soil texture isn't great, but the fertility is. And then by year 2 after they've been off of that, it's pretty nice soil. And we've been adding compost as well to just improve the texture. Also, so but yeah, vegetables really like growing in poop. So. Right. Awesome. Okay, so 2 questions. One is, as we transition to no-till, are we going to keep putting the sheep there in our vegetable field? And the second question is, what are good weed management strategies for no-till? So, first one is still up for debate on our farm. We haven't decided yet. There are still a few spots that haven't been converted to no-till yet, so that's where the sheep are going this winter. But once we convert it all to no-till, Emily, my co-farmer, said maybe we should put them in there anyway and just kind of revamp those beds, retill them up after the sheep are gone and whatever. Maybe that's one option, or maybe we start overwintering them in the field. So basically bale grazing in the pasture, which would be really good for improving our pasture too, which feels like it might be the way we go, actually. Yeah, and then in terms of weed management in no-till, so our biggest weed problem is Canada thistle. So that's a perennial, and so our best strategy that we've found has been to tarp, pre-planting, for as long as we can, and also to tarp like after we get things out of the field. So just having a tarp on there for a solid month or 2, if we can, to really get those thistles down, and yeah, kind of beat them back, has resulted in some of the cleanest looking beds that we've been able to have it under no-till. Yeah.
So in one of your slides, I did see a lot of Canada thistle.
Yes.
And you do have them grazing that. So do you think that them grazing it has almost made it worse since they do spread by rhizomes, or do you not know?
Yeah, so the question is, could the Canada thistle be made worse by the sheep grazing it since it does spread by rhizomes? That's totally possible. And it's totally possible, too, that our weeding strategy also just causes the Canada thistle to keep spreading, because pulling it up, they'll just keep going. So I think of the sheep as like pretty similar to our weeding strategy of just pulling it up, but the sheep are getting nutrition from it, which is nice. But yeah, I'm just trying to think if in what ways the Canada thistle pressure has changed over the years. And I would say that we have spots of the field that are like colonies of thistle, and kind of stay that way. And every June, in late June, when the thistle is starting to flower, we do a really big, like, go through the whole farm, like the vegetable field and the pasture, and try to grab the plants that are as they're flowering, so at their weakest point. And that it has actually, I think, made a difference in our pastures, especially. And yeah, the vegetable field, it's just like part of what we do is pull a bunch of thistle all the time.
So you said before that there are a lot of food safety precautions with having like livestock on vegetable farms. So have you found it difficult to maneuver those food safety protocols with vegetables?
Yeah, so the question was about food safety and vegetables, growing vegetables, and livestock. And so the big thing that we take a lot of care in, number one, we get the sheep out of the field in time, and are aware of that. But then the other big aspect is like manure on our clothes, or potential contamination from us doing chores versus us being in the vegetable field. So we try to, we definitely do like wash our boots, or sometimes even change clothes between livestock chores and vegetable field things, especially harvest. So we basically try to be careful, try to be conscious of when we're interacting with the animals versus when we're interacting with the vegetables. So that's basically the extent of it. We're a small enough farm that we're exempt from the FSMA stuff. So though we're trained in it, we don't have to like document all of that or anything like that. But yeah, that's. Yeah.
Have you received any or utilized any technical or financial assistance from any organization, agency, anything like that?
Have we received any technical or financial assistance? For the livestock, for the sheep, we received an NRCS cost share for improving our pasture. So we seeded a bunch of clover into our pasture with an NRCS cost share. That's basically the only assistance like that we've gotten for the livestock. Yeah.
By the way, thanks everyone for asking questions.
Yeah, this is great.
How do you think that, going back to the Canada thistle problem, how do you figure that tarping is helping control?
Yeah, so the question is, with our Canada thistle problem, how is tarping helping control them? So our tarps are like 25 feet long by the length of our bed, which is 150 feet. So we do several beds at once, over 150 feet of tarp. So that really, the rhizomes that are under there can't get any light for 1 to 2 months, which doesn't kill them completely. Definitely doesn't kill them completely, but it makes them really weak. So when we take the tarp off, we actually see kind of ghost thistles, like white little thistles that have been trying to come up. And we take the tarp off, and then we hoe those down, so that basically it's 2 months of photosynthesis that those rhizomes don't get to have, and so that weakens them, and hopefully if we tarp kind of enough spots and often enough, then that can really hold those back. and yeah, maybe someday we'll eliminate them, but it seems unlikely.
Maybe more of a question about the vegetable garden part, but that deer fence, does it go around the whole vegetable property or not the whole thing?
No. Yeah, so the question about our deer fence, yeah, our deer fence is 7 feet high, and it goes around our vegetable field. So it encloses like 2.5 acres of vegetables. Yeah, in terms of our deer fence, the guy who built the fence said you have to build it 7 feet high to keep them out, and 10 feet high to keep them in. So we have, like, sometimes when we've forgotten to close the gate, we've gotten deer in the field and then they jump out. But we've never had deer in the field unless we accidentally leave the gate open. So, yeah. Have we ever thought about adding any other animal enterprises? We've definitely thought about adding poultry in a like more like business oriented way, like adding layers that are actually trying to make money, or adding broilers. We've also thought about ducks because they're fun, or at least they sound fun. I don't have a lot of experience with them. And yeah, our land base isn't big enough for cattle to really make sense, I don't think. But there's always the dream of like the cow, the one dairy cow or something, for home use. But that's a long way off. So I think for our land base, what we're doing is we're pretty much set with what we're doing. But yeah, given more land, I'd be very interested in adding cattle, because of knowing like just how positively impactful they can be on the soil.
All right, I got a lot of questions.
Great.
You said most of the meat is sold via cuts at the markets, and you don't do by wholes and halves.
Yeah. So in terms of our marketing, we started by kind of selling by the cuts at market, mostly because with the pigs especially, there wasn't any other pork at our farmers market, and so I wanted to be able to offer that. We do now do wholes and halves of pigs and wholes of lamb, and yeah, it's interesting because selling by cuts at farmers market, because we're already at farmers market, because we're a vegetable farm, it makes sense. But if we were selling that volume of cuts, just selling meat at market, it wouldn't make any sense for us to be going to market. So it's a good complement, or like addition to what we're able to do already. But if we were just a meat farm, then I would want to just be doing wholes and halves, or selling into like a grocery or something.
So then how many chest freezers do you have?
We have a lot of chest freezers. We have three big ones for our meat that is for sale. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed any particular breed of pig that does better on this pasture, or what's your normal?
Yeah, so breed of pig. Our pig breeding, our pig breeds are kind of determined by who's around us with feeder pigs available. So we've done, I think the ones that were in the pictures were Hampshires, and we've also had Yorks. I think those are the main types that we've had access to, and they seem to do well. Yeah, so the Yorks are the pink pigs, which have danger of getting sunburned, but that hasn't, like, they haven't had dropsy, which is the thing that happens when pigs get sunburned. They can like not be able to walk, but we haven't experienced that, so that's good.
You say your apples and like hazelnuts, chestnuts, they're not producing yet?
Yeah, our perennial crops are not producing yet, but someday they will be, and that'll be fun to have chestnuts for the pigs to eat. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I think we will have the pigs, the pasture that the pigs are in, or have been in and have kind of turned into a place where we can't get the tractor, is where we've also planted our chestnut trees. So that's kind of a symbiosis we're planning on for the future when our chestnuts are producing. But we also are going to want to be harvesting chestnuts for human consumption too, and so that's something that we're going to have to figure out as they start producing, how to safely harvest human grade chestnuts. Yeah.
What networks are you part of? Like, where do you get information and ideas? And yeah, what do you recommend? Like, where should we all go home and like look up these 3 places?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So what networks am I part of, and where should we find out more information about doing animals? So my my experience with doing animals, I have just found a mentor for each species of animal that I have done, and I basically copy them. I call them for advice. During my first several seasons of lambing, I was calling Barb, my sheep mentor, all the time, being like, like what do I do? And now we've like come to a place where we don't need to call Barb every time a sheep has a lamb. But yeah, and my pig mentor is also is also really great for someone just to go to and be like, have you experienced this kind of problem? Like, should I call the vet about this, or should I just let it be, pigs with limps or whatever. So that's what I really recommend is finding a person whose farm you've been on, who you're comfortable asking questions of. And then beyond that, I'll just share that my pig person is Dana Burtness of Nettle Valley Farm. So she's in my neck of the woods, but she will love to talk your ear off about pastured pig production. So Nettle Valley Farm, you can look her up on the social medias. And yeah, I definitely will say that I'm much more of a vegetable nerd than a livestock nerd. So I don't like my livestock stuff is just kind of seat of the pants, like get the tools that I need and see what happens. And so I like totally think that if you're at a small enough scale, if you're just kind of experimenting, that's a great way to go. I recommend it. And then you can build up some experience and then really like know the questions that you want to ask your people. So.
Any advice for the vegetable side?
Advice for the vegetable. Yeah, so vegetable networks. Yeah, so I've been involved with Practical Farmers of Iowa a lot, and that's basically the people that I go to for my vegetable production kind of nerd out sessions. And and then also, like in my local area, there are several other kind of vegetable farms at a similar scale to our farm, and so we make a point of getting together every winter, and seeing what's up with everyone's farm, what challenges they've had, what new things they're excited about, and then also just seeing what markets each of us are trying to be in, and making sure we're supporting each other as we kind of try to reach all the people in our community with local food. So, yeah, that's a good. It's really feels good to be in collaboration with the vegetable producers around us.
Expand on what that conversation actually looks like, because I feel like in so many places in our lives through the PFI network, there's like this magic of collaboration in different communities. So how did you like start those conversations to reach that point of
Yeah, how did we start those conversations to reach a point of collaboration versus competition? I would say that it it's like it's been a very intentional choice on all of our parts to like I feel like competition is like the natural like response. Like, oh, Eric's doing CSA. Like, oh man, like why is he like getting in my business or whatever? Um, but figuring like just realizing that each of us have have actually different networks, and so by supporting each other, like in cultivating our own customer base, we can we can make the whole food system stronger, and we can like point to different vegetable growers for different crops that we aren't growing. So that's a really useful spot to work on is what crops have we stopped growing, and where can our customers like get them locally. um, that's a fun feeling to be able to support another business by sending your customers their way. um, yeah, yeah. Also, I will say that at the beginning of the pandemic, um, a friend a friend of ours said, hey, like people are really worried about their food, like maybe you should do like direct deliveries to people. um, it was March, right, and we had spinach in the high tunnel, and that's about it. But we were like, oh yeah, like this is like people are thinking about where they're going to get their food, and so we um, we started thinking about that, and then Emily said, hey, like we should talk to the other growers and see what they're um, up to. And so then we had a group of about four of us growers who were like, oh, like how can we work together to get our food to the people? And then I looped in the local food hub, and then they had some kind of infrastructure in terms of they had their website, they had other things, and so we formed an online market using through the food hub, and did direct deliveries to people's stores at the beginning of the pandemic, and now that has turned into an online market that keeps going every week, and mostly people pick it up from the food hub, but some people choose delivery still, and about 50 different producers are selling a little bit at least through the online market now. So that's been a really cool like product of our collaboration, and the people who are customers of this online market are different than the farmers market customers and then the CSA customers. So it reached a whole new segment of the community, which is cool. Yeah. Here's a question.
Might be off topic a bit, but how'd you come up with the name?
How did I come up with the name Humble Hands Harvest? Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because I was just trying to think of a farm name, and I was thinking of my name. This is back when I was a sole proprietorship. I was just me, um, and I thought of, so my name Breckbill probably comes from some German that means a hill that has been tilled after being fallow, has just been broken. Um, and I was like, wow, that there's so much potential there. But then I couldn't actually come up with like what that would be. And so then I went to my mom's maiden name, which is Stolzfuß, which German directly translates proudfoot. And I was like, cool, proudfoot. That's also like has some, but I don't want foot in there, and like proud feels like not really my style, and so I just reversed them both, and Humble Hands came out, and I was like, that's nice. So that's how that happened. And And then when Emily joined the farm, I was like, we don't have to be Humble Hands. We could be anything else. And Emily's like, I don't want to have to think of a name. Like we're going to be Humble Hands. So, yep.
All right, well, Hannah, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for letting us pick your brain for the last hour.
Yeah, it's fun to be picked at.